My parents chose my sister's wedding over my military deployment. Now, 20 years later, they showed up at my Pentagon office begging for help. But what happened next changed everything, and they never saw it coming. I'm Commander David Mitchell, though back then I was just another recruit, trying to prove himself worthy of wearing the uniform. At 35 years old, I've spent the last 18 years of my military career climbing from the absolute bottom. We're scrubbing latrines at 0400, doing push-ups in the mud during torrential downpours, and carrying 80-pound rucksacks through swampland in Georgia heat. I started as a private E1, the lowest rank you can possibly hold, but we'll get to how I earned my stars later. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. First, you need to understand the household I grew up in, because that foundation shaped everything that came after. Living in the Peterson family home was like existing in some alternate reality, where I was practically invisible, while my younger sister Victoria was treated like visiting royalty. Every conversation at the dinner table revolved around her latest achievement, her upcoming dance recital, or her college applications. Our living room looked like a shrine dedicated to Victoria's accomplishments. Every wall was covered with her academic awards, dance trophies, debate team certificates, and scholarship announcements. The mantelpiece displayed her honor roll plaques in chronological order. Even the refrigerator was plastered with her report cards, college acceptance letters, and newspaper clippings from when she won the state debate championship. Meanwhile, my presence in that house was documented by exactly 2 items: my high school diploma hanging in the hallway closet behind winter coats, and a single photo from my football team tucked inside a drawer somewhere. That was it. 18 years of existence condensed into 2 forgotten pieces of paper. It wasn't like I was some troublemaker causing chaos. I maintained solid grades, played varsity football for 3 years, worked weekends at the local hardware store, and never once got called into the principal's office. But in my parents' eyes, this was just a baseline expectation. No celebration, no acknowledgement, maybe a brief nod if they happened to notice. Meanwhile, Victoria getting a B+ on a history test warranted a family dinner at her favorite restaurant. By my sophomore year, I started spending most of my free time at the local gym. Partly because I needed to stay in shape for football, but mostly because I needed somewhere to channel all that frustration. The gym became my refuge while Victoria was getting private tutoring sessions and SAT prep courses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I was in that basement with second-hand weights I'd bought from garage sales, using equipment that creaked and wobbled with every rep. Dad never once asked about my training routine, never showed interest in my football games, never even acknowledged when I made varsity as a sophomore. He was too busy driving Victoria to debate tournaments 3 states away, or recording her mock trial performances. The few times I tried to share something about football or my workout progress, he'd listen for about 30 seconds before his attention drifted to whatever Victoria needed help with. Want to know what really stings? I can count on one hand how many of my football games they attended over 4 years. 3 games total, 3. They always had some excuse ready. Victoria had a debate tournament that weekend. Victoria needed help preparing for her college interviews. Victoria had some academic competition that required their full attention and support. During my senior year, I scored the winning touchdown in our homecoming game against our biggest rivals. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about it, complete with action photos. Neither of my parents saw it happen live, because Victoria had a college campus visit that same weekend. When I showed them the newspaper article at breakfast the next Monday, Dad glanced at it for maybe 10 seconds before asking Victoria about her campus tour experience. That's when I made the decision that would define the rest of my life. While my classmates were applying to colleges and planning their next 4 years of education, I was researching military service. Not because I had some childhood dream of being a soldier, and not because I came from a military family. I enlisted because I needed to find somewhere I belonged, somewhere my efforts would actually matter to someone. The day I told my parents about my decision to join the Army, we were sitting around the dinner table. Victoria was going on about her acceptance to Princeton with a full academic scholarship, and how excited she was about majoring in international relations. When there was finally a break in the conversation, I cleared my throat and announced that I'd enlisted, and would be shipping out to basic training right after graduation. The silence that followed was deafening, not because they were shocked or concerned about my safety, but because I'd interrupted Victoria's moment. Mom was the first to speak, and her exact words were, "Well, I suppose that's one way to figure out your future." Then she immediately turned back to Victoria and asked about her freshman year course selections. Dad's response was even worse. He just shrugged and said, "Military service builds character. Might be good for you." Then he launched into a 10-minute speech about how proud he was of Victoria for choosing such a prestigious university, and how her degree would set her up for success in international business or diplomacy. I graduated high school on a Tuesday in June. My parents attended the ceremony, but only because Victoria was giving the valedictorian speech. After the ceremony, while other families were taking photos and celebrating their children's achievements, mine was focused entirely on Victoria's performance. The handful of photos they took that included me were clearly afterthoughts, with me standing awkwardly on the edge of group shots centered around Victoria's cap and gown. 2 weeks later, I was on a bus to Fort Benning, Georgia, for basic training. No going-away party, no family dinner, no emotional send-off at the bus station. Victoria was busy preparing for her pre-freshman summer program at Princeton, and my parents were helping her shop for dorm room supplies. I said goodbye to them at breakfast, grabbed my single duffel bag, and walked out the front door knowing I was finally heading somewhere I might actually matter. Basic training was the hardest thing I'd ever experienced, but also the most rewarding. For the first time in my life, my effort was directly connected to recognition. When I performed well during physical training, the drill sergeants noticed. When I helped struggling soldiers improve their performance, my squad leaders took note. When I volunteered for extra duties or challenging assignments, it actually counted for something. The guys in my unit became the first real family I'd ever known. These were soldiers from all over the country, different backgrounds and different reasons for serving, but we had each other's backs in ways my biological family never did. When someone was struggling with marksmanship, we stayed after hours to help them improve. When someone got bad news from home, we rallied around them. When someone succeeded, we all celebrated together. I threw myself into military life with everything I had. I volunteered for every training opportunity, studied military strategy and history during my free time, and pushed myself to exceed every standard they set. By the end of basic training, I'd earned recognition as the top graduate in my company. For the first time in my life, someone was genuinely proud of what I'd accomplished. After basic, I was assigned to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, with the 101st Airborne Division. The transition from training to active duty was intense, but I loved every minute of it. I was finally part of something bigger than myself, something that mattered. My squad leaders recognized my potential early and started grooming me for leadership positions. Within 6 months, I'd been promoted to Private First Class. Within a year, I became a specialist. The promotions weren't handed to me because of family connections or favoritism. I earned every single one through performance, dedication, and proving I could handle increased responsibility. My commanding officers started talking about sending me to leadership development courses and potentially recommending me for the Warrior Leader course. Meanwhile, Victoria was posting constant updates on social media about her amazing college experience. Princeton this, Princeton that, internship opportunities, study abroad programs, sorority events. My parents shared every single post, adding their own proud commentary about their daughter's incredible achievements. Not once did they mention that their son was serving his country or achieving recognition in his own right. The disconnect became crystal clear during my first leave. I came home after completing airborne school, proudly wearing my jump wings and ready to share some of my experiences. Victoria happened to be home from college that same weekend, and guess which child got all the attention? She spent the entire dinner talking about her international relations courses and her professor, who used to work at the State Department. When I tried to mention earning my airborne qualification, Dad literally interrupted me mid-sentence to ask Victoria about her summer internship prospects. That's when I realized nothing had changed. I could earn every military decoration available, save lives, serve my country with distinction, and it would never matter to them as much as Victoria's latest academic achievement. So I stopped trying to impress them and focused entirely on excelling within the military structure, where my efforts were actually valued and recognized. Little did I know that decision would eventually put me in a position where they'd need something from me, and I'd have all the power to decide whether they deserved my help. 2 years into my military service, I'd found my rhythm at Fort Campbell. I was now a sergeant, leading my own squad of 8 soldiers, and my commanding officers were already talking about fast-tracking me for staff sergeant. The 101st Airborne had become more than just my unit. These soldiers were my brothers, and we operated like a well-oiled machine. My squad specialized in reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. We'd spend weeks in the field, conducting surveillance operations and gathering critical information that would inform larger military strategies. The work was demanding, requiring precision, patience, and absolute trust in your team. One mistake could compromise entire missions and put lives at risk. During this time, I was also pursuing my bachelor's degree through the Army's continuing education program. While other soldiers spent their downtime playing video games or hitting the bars in nearby Clarksville, I was in the base library studying military history, strategic planning, and international relations. Ironic, considering that was Victoria's major, but I was approaching it from a practical, tactical perspective rather than theoretical academic discussions. My platoon leader, Captain Rodriguez, pulled me aside after a particularly successful training exercise. "Mitchell, you've got natural leadership instincts and the tactical mind we need in our officer corps. Have you considered applying for officer candidate school?" The suggestion caught me off guard. Becoming an officer meant more responsibility, more training, but also the opportunity to make strategic decisions that could impact hundreds of soldiers' lives. I threw myself into preparing for the OCS application process. The physical requirements were brutal. We're talking 12-mile ruck marches with full gear, obstacle courses that would break most civilians, and endurance tests designed to weed out anyone who wasn't completely committed. The academic portion required mastering everything from military law to logistics management to tactical planning. During this intense preparation period, I received news that would test everything I'd learned about leadership and personal integrity. Our unit was being deployed to Afghanistan for a 9-month combat mission. This wasn't a training exercise or a peacekeeping mission. We were heading into active combat zones where the decisions I made could mean the difference between my soldiers coming home alive or in flag-draped coffins. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. The deployment notification came with a 4-week preparation period, 4 weeks to complete additional specialized training, update all personal affairs, and prepare mentally for what we might face overseas. For married soldiers, this meant arranging extended childcare and financial support systems. For single soldiers like me, it meant updating beneficiary information and making sure someone back home knew our wishes if things went sideways. I decided to use my pre-deployment leave to visit home one last time, not because I expected some emotional family farewell, but because I felt obligated to inform them personally about the deployment. If something happened to me overseas, I didn't want them finding out through an official military notification. The drive from Fort Campbell to my hometown in Ohio gave me plenty of time to think. I'd grown up in this place, but returning now felt like visiting a foreign country. Everything looked smaller somehow, less significant. The high school football field, where I'd once thought scoring touchdowns was the most important thing in the world, now seemed trivial compared to the responsibilities I carried for my soldiers' lives. Walking through the front door of my childhood home felt surreal. The Victoria Shrine had actually expanded since my last visit. New awards, new photos from Princeton's social events, internship certificates, study abroad pictures from her semester in London. The living room looked like a museum dedicated to her achievements, with professional lighting and carefully arranged displays. Victoria was home for winter break, and the timing couldn't have been worse. She was in full wedding planning mode, having gotten engaged to her Princeton boyfriend, Jonathan Whitfield III, some trust fund legacy whose family owned a chain of luxury hotels. The engagement had happened during a vacation in the Hamptons, complete with a photographer to capture the spontaneous proposal moment. The house was chaotic. Wedding magazines covered every surface, fabric samples hung from door frames, and Victoria's phone rang constantly with calls from wedding planners, caterers, and venue coordinators. Mom had transformed the dining room into a wedding planning headquarters, with color-coded binders, budget spreadsheets, and vendor contact lists, organized with military precision that would have impressed my drill sergeants. Dad had taken time off work to help coordinate the logistics. This was the same man who couldn't find time to attend my high school football games, but he'd cleared his entire schedule to sample wedding cakes and interview photographers. The wedding was scheduled for late spring, about 6 months away, and they were planning it like a state dinner for foreign dignitaries. The guest list alone included over 300 people. Victoria wanted a destination wedding at some exclusive resort in Napa Valley that charged $500 per plate just for dinner. The venue rental fee was $25,000 for a single day, not including decorations, music, photography, or any of the other dozens of expenses that kept growing by the hour. I waited for the right moment to break my news, finally finding an opportunity during a brief lull in wedding conversation. I need to let you all know that I'm being deployed to Afghanistan next month. We'll be gone for 9 months, possibly longer depending on mission requirements. The reaction was not what I'd hoped for, but exactly what I'd expected. Victoria looked up from her wedding planning binder with obvious annoyance. Can't you request a delay or something? My wedding is May 15th and I need my family there. This is supposed to be the most important day of my life. Mom jumped in immediately with her solution-oriented approach. David, surely the Army can work around family obligations. Can you talk to your supervisor about postponing this until after Victoria's wedding? It's only a few months. The disconnect was staggering. They genuinely believed military deployments worked like vacation requests, something you could reschedule around family events. Dad, trying to sound reasonable while completely missing the point, suggested I explain to my commanding officers that I had family commitments that required my presence stateside. It doesn't work that way, I explained patiently. This is a combat deployment. My soldiers are counting on me to lead them. I can't just ask for a postponement because of a wedding. Victoria's response revealed everything about how she viewed my military service. It's not just a wedding, David. This is my marriage, the beginning of my entire future. You're being selfish, putting some Army obligation ahead of your family. Selfish. She called me selfish for fulfilling my military duties, for leading soldiers into combat, for serving my country. Meanwhile, she was demanding that I abandon my responsibilities so I could stand around in a tuxedo taking photos at her $200,000 party. The argument escalated quickly. Victoria started crying, claiming I was ruining her special day by choosing the Army over family. Mom sided with her immediately, suggesting there must be some way to work around the deployment schedule. Dad remained silent, but his expression made it clear where his loyalties lay. You knew I was in the military when you decided to plan this wedding, I pointed out. You knew deployments were part of military service. You could have asked about my schedule before booking everything. We shouldn't have to plan our family events around your career choices, Victoria shot back. You chose to join the Army. We didn't choose to have our family torn apart by your decisions. That's when the real truth came out. This wasn't about missing one family event. This was about my entire military career being viewed as an inconvenience to their lives, something that interfered with their perfect family image. They wanted me to be available for their important moments while dismissing my responsibilities as unnecessary complications. The final blow came when Mom suggested I consider leaving the military altogether. You've served your time, David. You've proven whatever you needed to prove. Maybe it's time to think about a more stable career, something that doesn't take you away from family when we need you. Leave the military. Abandon the only place I'd ever found purpose, respect, and genuine brotherhood. Give up the career where my leadership actually saved lives and made a difference in the world. Also, I could be available for Victoria's social events and family photo opportunities. I realized in that moment that they would never understand what my military service meant to me, and more importantly, they didn't want to understand. My purpose, my achievements, my responsibilities, none of it mattered compared to Victoria's wedding timeline. The next morning, I packed my bags and returned to Fort Campbell without attending any more wedding planning sessions. I had soldiers to prepare for combat, lives to protect, and a mission to complete. My real family was waiting for me back on base, trusting me to bring them home alive. Little did I know this deployment would become the foundation for everything that followed, setting me on a path that would eventually lead to wearing stars on my collar and having the power to decide their fate when they came crawling back for help. The flight from Kentucky to Germany felt like crossing into another dimension. 24 soldiers from my platoon, all carrying the same nervous energy mixed with determination. We'd trained for this moment for months, but nothing really prepares you for that first step onto the transport plane, knowing you're heading into active combat. Our deployment to Afghanistan was part of Operation Enduring Freedom, stationed at Forward Operating Base Thunder in Paktia Province. The base was a small outpost surrounded by mountains, housing about 400 American soldiers and coalition forces. Our mission was reconnaissance and intelligence gathering in one of the most dangerous regions of the country, where Taliban insurgents moved freely through mountain passes and cave systems. The living conditions were exactly what you'd expect from a forward operating base in a combat zone. We slept in plywood huts with thin walls that did nothing to block the sound of incoming mortar rounds. The dining facility served meals that barely qualified as food, and the only entertainment was whatever books or movies soldiers had brought from home. Internet access was limited to 15-minute sessions once a week, if the satellite connection was working. But none of that mattered because we had work to do. Real work that could save American lives and disrupt enemy operations. My squad was responsible for conducting night patrols through villages, where intelligence suggested Taliban fighters were hiding weapons caches or planning attacks on coalition forces. These weren't training exercises where mistakes meant push-ups. One wrong decision could get everyone killed. The first month was an adjustment period. Learning the terrain, understanding local customs, building relationships with village elders who might provide information about insurgent activities. We worked with interpreters who risked their lives helping us, knowing that Taliban retribution for collaboration meant death for them and their families. My soldiers adapted quickly to the harsh conditions and dangerous work. Private Collins, a 19-year-old kid from Nebraska, became our expert at reading body language and spotting potential threats in crowded marketplaces. Specialist Martinez, whose family had immigrated from Mexico, had a natural talent for connecting with local children and gathering intelligence through casual conversations. Sergeant Thompson, a veteran of 3 previous deployments, taught everyone advanced tactical techniques that kept us alive during night operations. During our second month, we received intelligence about a major weapons cache hidden in a village about 12 kilometers from our base. The information came from a reliable source, but accessing the location required a dangerous nighttime operation through territory known for improvised explosive devices and sniper positions. I spent 3 days planning the mission, studying satellite imagery, coordinating with other units, and preparing contingency plans for every possible scenario. The operation required precise timing, absolute silence, and perfect coordination between multiple teams. One mistake could alert insurgents to our presence and turn a reconnaissance mission into a firefight in civilian territory. The night of the operation, we moved out at 0200 hours under complete darkness. No night vision technology could eliminate all the risks. We were walking through territory where every step could trigger an explosive device, and enemy fighters knew the terrain better than we ever would. The weight of responsibility for 8 soldiers' lives pressed down on me with every decision. We found the weapons cache exactly where intelligence had indicated. Enough rifles, ammunition, and explosive materials to supply a significant attack on coalition forces. But more importantly, we discovered documents that revealed planned attacks on 3 other forward operating bases. Information that would save hundreds of American lives. The extraction was where things got complicated. Taliban fighters had spotted our movement and were positioning for an ambush as we returned to base. I had to make a split-second decision: take the longer, safer route and risk being trapped in enemy territory at sunrise, or push through a known danger zone but reach safety before daylight. I chose the dangerous route. We moved fast and silent through a valley where enemy fighters were known to position snipers. About halfway through, we started taking sporadic gunfire from elevated positions. I called in air support while directing my soldiers to defensive positions, then coordinated a tactical withdrawal that got everyone out alive with 0 casualties. The information we gathered during that mission prevented 3 major attacks and led to the capture of a high-value Taliban commander. My actions during the extraction earned me a Bronze Star Medal and a promotion to Staff Sergeant. More importantly, it established my reputation as a leader who could make the hard decisions under pressure and bring soldiers home alive. Meanwhile, back home, Victoria's wedding preparations had reached fever pitch. Through social media posts and the occasional email from Mom, I could see the scope of this production expanding beyond anything reasonable. They'd hired a wedding planner who specialized in celebrity events, contracted a photographer whose previous clients included movie stars and politicians, and booked a string quartet that normally performed at Lincoln Center. High-ends. The dress alone cost more than most soldiers make in 3 months. Victoria posted photos of herself at exclusive bridal boutiques in New York City, trying on designer gowns that required teams of seamstresses for custom alterations. The engagement photos, shot at various locations around Princeton and Manhattan, looked like they belonged in a high-end fashion magazine. Mom had apparently taken a leave of absence from her real estate job to focus entirely on wedding coordination. Dad was using his business connections to secure vendors and locations that were normally booked years in advance. They were treating this wedding like a political campaign, with detailed timelines, assigned responsibilities, and backup plans for every possible contingency. The guest list had grown to over 400 people, including Princeton faculty, Jonathan's business associates, family friends, and what appeared to be half of their country club membership. The reception venue had been changed twice to accommodate the expanding guest count, finally settling on a resort that required guests to stay on site for the entire weekend. But here's what really got to me. They started posting family photos on social media with captions like, "Getting ready for Victoria's big day, and so excited to celebrate our daughter's wedding with all our loved ones." Every post featured the 3 of them, Mom, Dad, and Victoria, like I didn't exist. Not one mention of their son serving in combat. Not one acknowledgement that a member of their family was risking his life for his country. The breaking point came during one of my weekly internet sessions. I logged into my email to find a message from Victoria with the subject line, "Final headcount needed for wedding." She was asking for my definitive answer about attendance so they could finalize seating arrangements and catering numbers. The email was written like a business memo, with no acknowledgement of where I was or what I was doing, no concern for my safety, no questions about my deployment experience, no recognition that I was leading soldiers in combat operations. Just a demand for a yes or no answer, so her wedding planning could proceed smoothly. I sat in that internet cafe, surrounded by soldiers writing emails to their families, some of whom wouldn't make it home alive, and realized my family had no idea what we were sacrificing for our country. They were more concerned about seating charts and floral arrangements than whether their son and brother were coming home in one piece. That night, I made a decision that would define the rest of my military career. Instead of being bitter about their choices, I would channel that energy into becoming the best soldier and leader I could possibly be. If my family couldn't appreciate my service, I would earn the respect and recognition of those who understood what military sacrifice really meant. Over the next 6 months, I threw myself into every aspect of military excellence. I volunteered for the most dangerous missions, spent every free moment studying tactical manuals and military history, and mentored younger soldiers who reminded me of myself when I first enlisted. My commanding officers started talking about recommending me for advanced leadership training and potential officer candidate programs. The wedding came and went while I was conducting operations in the Hindu Kush Mountains. I learned about it through social media posts, showing elaborate decorations, expensive champagne toasts, and hundreds of guests celebrating in luxury, while soldiers like me were eating MREs in combat zones. But something interesting happened during those final months of deployment. The more my family dismissed my service, the more my military family embraced my dedication. Word of my leadership and tactical skills was reaching higher command levels, setting the stage for opportunities I'd never imagined possible. By the time we prepared to return stateside, I wasn't the same person who'd left 9 months earlier. I was a combat veteran with decorations, leadership experience, and the respect of soldiers and officers who'd seen me perform under the worst possible conditions. My family had chosen Victoria's wedding over supporting my deployment, But that decision had freed me to focus entirely on building something they could never take away from me. Returning from Afghanistan felt like landing on a different planet. After 9 months of constant vigilance, sleeping with one ear open for incoming mortars, and making life-or-death decisions daily, the simple act of walking into a grocery store without scanning for potential threats felt surreal. But while other soldiers struggled with the transition back to civilian normalcy, I threw myself deeper into military life. My Bronze Star in combat leadership record had caught the attention of Colonel Harrison, the base commander at Fort Campbell. 3 days after our return, I was called into his office for what I thought would be a routine debrief. Instead, he offered me something that would change the trajectory of my entire career. Staff Sergeant Mitchell, your performance in Afghanistan was exceptional. Your tactical decision-making under fire and ability to bring every soldier home alive tells me you have the potential for significant leadership roles in this Army. I'm recommending you for Officer Candidate School with a follow-up assignment to the Command and General Staff College. Officer Candidate School wasn't just advanced training, it was the gateway to becoming a commissioned officer, joining the ranks of those who made strategic decisions affecting thousands of soldiers. The program was notorious for its brutal physical and mental challenges, designed to weed out anyone who couldn't handle the pressure of officer-level responsibility. I accepted immediately. While Victoria was posting honeymoon photos from her 2-week European tour, courtesy of Jonathan's family connections, I was preparing for the most challenging military training program in existence. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were celebrating a wedding I'd missed while I was preparing for opportunities that would define my future. OCS at Fort Benning was 12 weeks of the most intense training I had ever experienced. We started each day at 0430 with physical training that pushed human endurance to its limits. The academic workload covered everything from military law and ethics to advanced tactical planning and resource management. The leadership exercises were designed to break you down mentally and rebuild you as someone capable of making decisions that could affect national security. Out of the 180 candidates who started the program, only 127 graduated. I finished third in my class, earning recognition for tactical excellence and peer leadership ratings. The graduation ceremony was attended by families of successful candidates, proud parents and spouses celebrating their loved ones' achievements. I looked out at the audience and saw empty seats where my family should have been. They weren't there because Victoria was having complications with her new apartment renovation. Apparently, the contractors had installed the wrong type of marble in her bathroom, and she needed mom and dad's immediate assistance dealing with interior designers and project managers. A bathroom renovation took priority over their son becoming a commissioned officer in the United States Army. But you know what? It didn't matter anymore. Colonel Harrison was there, along with several other senior officers who'd been following my progress. After the ceremony, he pulled me aside with news that would accelerate my career beyond anything I'd imagined. Lieutenant Mitchell, you're being assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg as a platoon leader, but more importantly, you've been selected for the Army's Advanced Military Studies program. It's a fast-track program for officers showing exceptional potential for senior leadership roles. The Advanced Military Studies program was designed for officers identified as future generals. The coursework covered strategic planning at the national level, international relations, advanced logistics management, and joint operations with other military branches. It was intensive graduate-level education combined with practical leadership assignments that prepared officers for roles at the Pentagon and major command positions. Fort Bragg was a different world from Fort Campbell. As home to the 82nd Airborne Division and Special Operations Command, it housed some of the most elite military units in the world. My platoon consisted of 30 paratroopers, each one a specialist in their field, all looking to me for leadership and tactical guidance. The responsibility was enormous. These weren't fresh recruits needing basic instruction. They were experienced soldiers with multiple deployments who expected their platoon leader to earn their respect through competence and decision-making ability. I spent my first month learning everything I could about each soldier's background, strengths, and areas where they needed development. My first major assignment came 6 months later, planning and executing a joint training exercise with Navy SEALs and Air Force Special Operations. The exercise simulated a complex hostage rescue scenario requiring coordination between multiple military branches, precise timing, and flawless execution under simulated combat conditions. I spent 3 weeks developing the operational plan, coordinating with commanders from other services, and preparing my paratroopers for their specific roles in the mission. The exercise lasted 72 hours and involved over 200 military personnel operating in simulated hostile territory. The operation was flawless. Every objective achieved, every timeline met, 0 simulated casualties. The after-action review praised my planning and coordination skills, with recommendations that my performance be included in my permanent record for future promotion considerations. Word of the successful exercise reached higher command levels, including General Patricia Williams, who commanded the entire 82nd Airborne Division. She requested a personal meeting to discuss my career trajectory and potential assignments. Lieutenant Mitchell, your tactical planning abilities and leadership under pressure indicate you have the potential for rapid advancement through officer ranks. I'm recommending you for early promotion to captain and assignment as a company commander. Additionally, I want you to consider applying for the Command and General Staff College next year. Company commander meant responsibility for 150 soldiers and their families. The Command and General Staff College was where the Army trained its future colonels and generals. These weren't just career advancement opportunities. They were recognition that senior leadership saw me as officer material for the highest levels of military command. Meanwhile, Victoria's social media presence had evolved into a full-time lifestyle brand. She was posting daily content about married life, home decoration, social events, and her volunteer work with various charity organizations. Her posts regularly received hundreds of likes and comments from friends praising her perfect life and beautiful home. My parents had become her biggest promoters, sharing every post and adding their own commentary about how proud they were of their successful daughter. Dad had even started mentioning Victoria's charity work in his business networking events, using her activities to enhance his own social standing. But here's what really highlighted the disconnect. During this same period, I was featured in Army Times magazine for my innovative training methods and leadership philosophy. The article discussed how my combat experience had shaped my approach to preparing soldiers for deployment, with quotes from soldiers in my command praising my dedication to their professional development. I sent the article to my parents, thinking they might be interested in their son's professional recognition in a national military publication. Mom's response was a 2-sentence email. "That's nice, David. Victoria just got selected to chair the hospital charity auction this year." That's when I realized they would never understand or appreciate what I was building. My military achievements, leadership responsibilities, and professional recognition would always be secondary to Victoria's social activities and volunteer work. So I stopped trying to include them in my success and focused entirely on excelling within the military community that actually valued my contributions. The next 2 years were a blur of rapid advancement and increasing responsibility. I was promoted to captain ahead of schedule, completed the Command and General Staff College with distinction, and was selected for assignment to the Pentagon as a strategic planning officer. Each promotion brought new challenges and opportunities to make decisions affecting military operations at the national level. My Pentagon assignment put me in daily contact with senior military leadership and civilian defense officials. I was working on strategic plans that would shape American military policy for decades, contributing to decisions that affected global security and international relations. The work was challenging and rewarding in ways I'd never imagined possible. By age 30, I was a major with Pentagon experience and recognition from the highest levels of military leadership. My performance evaluations consistently rated me in the top 1% of officers at my rank, with recommendations for continued rapid advancement and assignment to increasingly important positions. Victoria, meanwhile, had started a blog about entertaining and home design that had gained a modest following among her social circle. My parents treated this hobby like she'd launched a Fortune 500 company, constantly sharing her posts and talking about their daughter's entrepreneurial success at every social gathering. The contrast was becoming absurd. I was briefing generals and Pentagon officials on strategic military planning, while Victoria was writing blog posts about table settings and seasonal decorations. Yet in my parents' eyes, her lifestyle content was somehow more noteworthy than my role in national defense planning. But their dismissal of my achievements was actually liberating. Without the pressure of seeking their approval, I could focus entirely on military excellence and building relationships with leaders who recognized my potential. That focus was about to pay off in ways that would transform not just my career, but my entire understanding of what was possible when you dedicate yourself completely to something meaningful. My Pentagon assignment opened doors I hadn't even known existed. Working in the Office of Strategic Planning meant daily briefings with Joint Chiefs of Staff, collaboration with CIA analysts, and direct involvement in operations that would never make the evening news but shaped global security policy. At 32, I was one of the youngest majors ever assigned to such a critical position. The work was intellectually demanding in ways that made my previous military experience seem simple by comparison. Instead of leading individual units or planning tactical operations, I was now analyzing threats to American interests across multiple continents, developing strategies that required coordination between dozens of government agencies, and briefing senior officials on scenarios that could affect millions of lives. My specialty became counterterrorism strategy in the Middle East and Central Asia. My combat experience in Afghanistan, combined with my advanced education and strategic thinking abilities, made me uniquely qualified to understand both the tactical realities on the ground and the broader geopolitical implications of military action. Pentagon leadership started requesting my input on major policy decisions. The breakthrough that would define my career came during my second year at the Pentagon. Intelligence agencies had identified a complex terrorist network operating across 4 countries, with plans for coordinated attacks on American diplomatic facilities. The threat was real and imminent, but the political and military challenges of addressing it were enormous. Traditional approaches would have required massive military deployments, international negotiations that could take months, and operations that might destabilize entire regions. I spent 3 weeks developing an alternative strategy that combined targeted special operations, intelligence sharing with allied nations, diplomatic pressure, and economic sanctions to neutralize the threat without large-scale military action. My plan required unprecedented coordination between the State Department, CIA, Special Operations Command, and intelligence services from 6 allied countries. The operational timeline was compressed into a 30-day window, with multiple contingency plans for various scenarios. The complexity was staggering, but the potential to prevent major terrorist attacks made every detail crucial. I presented the strategy to a room full of Pentagon officials, including the Secretary of Defense and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The presentation lasted 2 hours, covering every aspect of the operation, from initial intelligence gathering to post-operative assessment. The questions were intense, probing every assumption and testing every contingency. The plan was approved and implemented exactly as I'd designed it. Over the next month, I coordinated operations across multiple time zones, managing real-time intelligence updates, adjusting tactical elements based on changing conditions, and ensuring seamless communication between all participating agencies. The stress was unlike anything I'd experienced, even in combat. The operation was a complete success. The terrorist network was dismantled, key leaders were captured or eliminated, and potential attacks on American facilities were prevented. The entire operation was classified at the highest levels, meaning the public would never know how close they'd come to a major terrorist attack or how it had been prevented. But within Pentagon circles, word spread quickly about the young major who designed and coordinated one of the most successful counterterrorism operations in recent memory. Within weeks, I was meeting with officials I'd only seen on television, receiving commendations from agencies I couldn't publicly acknowledge, and being considered for assignments that would accelerate my career beyond normal promotion timelines. General Robert Morrison, a 4-star general and director of the Joint Staff, called me into his office for what he described as a career-defining conversation. "Major Mitchell, your performance on Operation Sandstorm exceeded every expectation. You've demonstrated strategic thinking, operational excellence, and leadership capabilities that indicate you're ready for significant advancement." He offered me something unprecedented: early promotion to lieutenant colonel and assignment as deputy commander of Joint Special Operations Command, with a direct path to full colonel within 2 years. JSOC was responsible for the most sensitive military operations in the world, and deputy commander meant involvement in planning and executing missions that could change the course of international conflicts. I accepted immediately. By age 33, I was a lieutenant colonel with top-secret security clearances, briefing the president on national security issues and commanding operations that most military officers never even learn about. My rise through the ranks had accelerated beyond anything I'd imagined possible when I first enlisted. Meanwhile, my family's life had taken some interesting turns. Victoria's lifestyle blog had gained enough followers to attract some small sponsorship deals, which she and my parents treated like she'd been appointed to a Fortune 500 board of directors. She was posting sponsored content about kitchen appliances and home decoration products, earning what amounted to pocket money while pretending to be a serious businesswoman. More significantly, cracks were starting to appear in Victoria and Jonathan's perfect marriage. Through social media and occasional family updates, I could see signs of tension. The constant posting about their amazing life had become less frequent, and when Victoria did share content, it felt forced and artificial, rather than genuinely happy. Jonathan's hotel business was struggling with increased competition and changing travel patterns. The luxury resort market that had supported his family's wealth for decades was facing challenges from new business models and economic uncertainty. Their lifestyle, which had always been supported by family money, was requiring more careful financial management. My parents, who had borrowed heavily to help fund Victoria's wedding and subsequent lifestyle, were also feeling financial pressure. Dad's business wasn't generating the returns it had in previous years, and Mom's real estate career had been put on hold for so long that rebuilding her client base was proving difficult. But instead of acknowledging these challenges, they doubled down on maintaining appearances. Victoria's social media presence became more focused on projecting success, even as the reality behind the posts was becoming more strained. My parents continued bragging about their daughter's business success, even though her blog earnings were barely covering her monthly coffee budget. The contrast with my actual career trajectory was becoming almost comical. While Victoria was posting about seasonal tablescapes and home organization tips, I was briefing congressional committees on classified national security matters. While my parents were bragging about her entrepreneurial success, I was receiving commendations from the highest levels of government for preventing terrorist attacks. My promotion to full colonel came exactly when General Morrison had predicted, 2 years ahead of normal timelines. The ceremony was held at the Pentagon, attended by senior military leadership and government officials, whose names would be recognizable to anyone who follows national politics. It was recognition not just of my individual achievements, but of my potential for the highest levels of military leadership. Colonel Mitchell. The rank that put me in command of thousands of soldiers and made me responsible for operations affecting national security. I was 35 years old, had more combat decorations than most officers accumulated in entire careers, and was being discussed for promotion to general officer ranks. My family's response to my promotion? A brief congratulations text from Mom, followed immediately by 3 paragraphs about Victoria's latest blog post that had received more comments than usual. Dad didn't respond at all. He was too busy helping Victoria negotiate what she called a major partnership deal with a company that sold decorative pillows. That's when I realized they would never understand what I'd accomplished or appreciate the level of responsibility I carried. Their worldview was so limited to social appearances and trivial achievements that genuine accomplishment in service to the country was invisible to them. But their dismissal had an unexpected benefit. It freed me from any lingering desire for their approval and allowed me to focus entirely on the work that mattered. I was no longer the forgotten son trying to earn recognition from parents who couldn't see past their golden daughter. I was Colonel David Mitchell, on track to become one of the youngest generals in modern Army history. The foundation was set for the final phase of my rise, and unbeknownst to my family, their financial situation was about to become desperate enough that they'd need help from the son they'd spent decades ignoring. But by then, I'd be in a position where their opinion of me mattered far less than my opinion of them. At 37, I achieved something that less than 1% of military officers ever reach: promotion to Brigadier General. The ceremony was held in the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, attended by the Secretary of Defense, senior congressional leaders, and military officials, whose decisions shaped global security policy. I was now General David Mitchell, one of the youngest flag officers in the United States Army. The promotion came with command of the 25th Infantry Division at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, overseeing 17,000 soldiers and their families across multiple installations in the Pacific region. My responsibilities included strategic planning for potential conflicts in Asia, coordination with allied military forces throughout the Pacific, and ensuring readiness for rapid deployment anywhere in the world. But the real recognition of my strategic value came 6 months later when I was reassigned to the Pentagon as Deputy Director of Strategic Operations. This position put me at the center of America's military decision-making process, working directly with the Joint Chiefs of Staff on issues that affected global stability. I was briefing the President weekly, coordinating with foreign defense ministers, and making recommendations that influenced international policy. My office on the 4th floor of the Pentagon had windows overlooking the Potomac River and walls lined with commendations from every branch of government. The furniture was solid mahogany, the carpet was custom woven with military insignia, and the view reminded me daily that I'd risen from a forgotten son in Ohio to one of the most influential military leaders in America. Meanwhile, my family's carefully constructed facade was crumbling in spectacular fashion. The first cracks became visible when Jonathan's hotel empire started making headlines for all the wrong reasons. A series of poor investment decisions, combined with changing market conditions and increased competition from tech-savvy hospitality companies, had left his family business in serious financial trouble. The luxury resort chain that had funded their lavish lifestyle for decades was hemorrhaging money. Properties that had been profitable for generations were posting significant losses, and the debt accumulated from recent expansion projects was becoming unsustainable. Jonathan's family had leveraged their entire portfolio to fund new developments that weren't generating expected returns. Victoria's response to these financial pressures revealed everything about her character. Instead of supporting her husband through a difficult period or making lifestyle adjustments to reduce expenses, she became increasingly demanding and difficult. Her social media posts became more frequent and desperate, trying to maintain the appearance of wealth while their actual financial situation deteriorated. The lifestyle blog that my parents had treated like a major business success was generating barely enough revenue to cover Victoria's monthly shopping budget. The sponsored content deals she'd been bragging about were small-scale arrangements with companies that paid in products rather than cash. Her entrepreneurial empire was essentially a hobby that cost more money than it generated. My parents, who had stretched their own finances to support Victoria's wedding and subsequent lifestyle, found themselves in an increasingly precarious position. Dad's business, which had never recovered from economic changes in his industry, was barely breaking even. Mom's attempt to restart her real estate career had failed, partly because she'd been out of the market too long, and partly because she'd never been particularly successful to begin with. The financial pressure on all of them intensified when Jonathan and Victoria's marriage finally collapsed. The divorce proceedings revealed the true extent of their financial problems, with assets that had appeared substantial actually being heavily mortgaged, and debt levels that exceeded their combined income by significant margins. Victoria, who had never worked a real job or developed any practical skills, suddenly found herself facing the reality of supporting herself without family money or a wealthy husband. Her response was predictable. She moved back in with our parents and expected them to maintain her previous lifestyle while she, quote, figured things out. But my parents couldn't support Victoria's expectations because their own financial situation had become desperate. Years of living beyond their means, combined with poor investment decisions and the money they'd spent supporting Victoria's lifestyle, had left them with significant debt and limited assets. Their house, which they'd repeatedly mortgaged to fund various expenses, was worth less than what they owed on it. The final straw came when Dad's business partner embezzled funds from their company accounts, leaving him personally liable for business debts he couldn't pay. The legal proceedings that followed revealed the full extent of their financial mismanagement, with credit card debt, unpaid loans, and financial obligations that far exceeded their ability to repay. They tried everything they could think of before reaching out to me. Victoria attempted to restart her relationship with Jonathan, hoping to reconcile and regain access to his family's resources, but he'd moved on and wanted nothing to do with her financial problems. They approached other family members for loans, but everyone else had their own financial challenges and couldn't help with the amounts needed. My parents even considered bankruptcy, but their lawyer explained that their debt structure and asset situation meant they'd lose their house and most of their possessions, while still owing significant amounts to creditors. They were trapped in a financial situation with no good options and no one willing to help them. That's when they swallowed their pride and reached out to the son they'd ignored for decades. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing intelligence briefings for a National Security Council meeting. My secretary informed me that my mother was on the line, calling from an unknown number. I almost didn't take the call, but curiosity about why she'd be calling my Pentagon office got the better of me. "David, thank goodness you answered." Mom's voice was strained and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. "We need to talk to you about something important." "It's urgent." The conversation that followed was surreal. My mother, who had spent my entire adult life treating my military achievements as inconvenient interruptions to Victoria's social calendar, was now calling my Pentagon office asking for help with their financial crisis. She explained their situation in detail: the failed businesses, the mounting debt, the foreclosure proceedings, Victoria's divorce and return home, and their complete inability to resolve any of it themselves. They owed over $400,000 to various creditors, were 3 months behind on their mortgage, and facing the loss of everything they owned. "We know we haven't been the best parents to you, David, but we're family. We raised you, we supported you when you were young, and now we need your help. We don't know where else to turn." The irony was overwhelming. The woman who had dismissed my life-saving military deployment as less important than Victoria's wedding was now asking for help from the general she'd created through decades of neglect and dismissal. "How much do you need?" I asked, keeping my voice professional and detached. "We think $500,000 would cover everything: the debts, the mortgage, and enough to help Victoria get back on her feet. We know it's a lot, but you're successful now and we're desperate. We'll pay you back somehow." $500,000. The same amount they'd spent on Victoria's wedding and the lifestyle they'd maintained for years while ignoring my achievements and dismissing my service to the country. "What does Victoria think about this situation?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. There was a long pause before Mom responded. She's struggling with the transition. She's not used to financial constraints. She thinks maybe you could help her find some kind of government job, something that pays well and doesn't require too much experience." A government job. Victoria, who had never worked a day in her life, wanted me to use my position as a Pentagon general to get her a high-paying government position she wasn't qualified for. "I'll need to think about this," I told her. "This is a significant amount of money and a complex situation. I'll get back to you." After I hung up, I sat in my Pentagon office looking out at the Potomac River, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The forgotten son they'd dismissed and ignored was now in a position to save or destroy them, and they had no choice but to ask for help from the person they'd treated as invisible for decades. The decision I made next would define not just their future, but how I chose to use the power I'd built despite their neglect. They'd shown me who they really were when I needed them most, and now I had the opportunity to show them who I'd become because of their choices. I spent 3 days thinking about my family's request, but not in the way they probably hoped. Instead of calculating how to help them, I was reflecting on every moment that had brought us to this point. Every missed wrestling match, every dismissive comment, every time they'd chosen Victoria's trivial needs over my genuine achievements, and most importantly, their decision to prioritize a wedding over supporting their son's military deployment. On Friday afternoon, I made a decision that would close this chapter of my life forever. I called my mother back and arranged to meet them at their house on Sunday morning. I wanted to have this conversation in the same living room where they'd dismissed my life-threatening need for support, surrounded by Victoria's shrine of meaningless trophies and participation awards. The drive from Washington, D.C. to their house in Ohio gave me time to prepare what I wanted to say. I was no longer the desperate young soldier begging for help or understanding. I was Brigadier General David Mitchell, with the authority to approve or deny their request, and more importantly, with the clarity to see our relationship for exactly what it had always been. When I pulled into their driveway, I barely recognized the house. The perfectly manicured lawn was overgrown, the exterior paint was peeling, and Dad's luxury sedan had been replaced with a beat-up economy car that looked like it had seen better decades. The decline was visible everywhere, from broken shutters to a mailbox that was barely hanging on its post. Mom answered the door, and the change in her appearance was startling. The woman who had always been impeccably dressed and perfectly composed looked exhausted and defeated. Her clothes were outdated, her hair was poorly maintained, and she had the desperate look of someone who'd run out of options. Dad was waiting in the living room, sitting in the same chair where he'd dismissed my military service years earlier. He looked older, smaller somehow, diminished by circumstances he couldn't control or manipulate. Victoria was there too, and the transformation was the most dramatic of all. The princess who had been the center of their universe looked bitter and resentful, angry at a world that had stopped catering to her every whim. "David, thank you so much for coming," Mom began, her voice carrying a tone of forced gratitude. "We know how busy you must be with your important work." I sat down across from them, wearing my dress uniform with all the decorations I'd earned through 2 decades of military service. The Bronze Star from Afghanistan, the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Joint Service Commendation Medal, and a dozen other ribbons representing achievements they'd never acknowledged or understood. "You asked for $500,000, I said, cutting straight to the point. "That's a significant amount of money. Before I make any decision, I want to understand something. Do you remember the last time we had a serious conversation in this room?" The silence was deafening. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair, Mom stared at her hands, and Victoria looked confused, as if she couldn't imagine what I was referring to. "It was about 15 years ago," I continued. "I came here to ask for help with a life-threatening situation. I was being deployed to Afghanistan, leading soldiers into combat, and you told me I was being selfish for not prioritizing Victoria's wedding." "That was different," Victoria interrupted, her voice sharp with the same entitled tone I remembered. "That was my wedding day, the most important day of my life. You could have requested a delay or found some way to work around it." Different. Even now, facing financial ruin and desperate for help, she still believed her wedding had been more important than my military service and the lives of the soldiers under my command. I turned to Dad. "Do you remember what you told me when I explained that my soldiers were counting on me? When I said this was my duty and responsibility?" Dad cleared his throat, trying to sound authoritative despite his diminished circumstances. "You were young then, David. You didn't understand the importance of family obligations. This is different. We're talking about losing our home, our entire life." "You're right," I said, standing up and walking to the wall covered with Victoria's achievements. "This is different. When I needed help, you had options. You had savings, equity in this house, successful careers. You chose to spend that money on a wedding instead of helping your son survive." I turned back to face them. "Now you're asking me to use my success I built despite your lack of support, to solve problems you created by prioritizing Victoria's lifestyle over financial responsibility." Mom started crying, the same manipulative tears she'd used throughout my childhood when she wanted to avoid accountability. "We made mistakes, David. We know that now. But we're your parents. We raised you, we loved you, and now we need your help. Isn't family supposed to help families?" "Family," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "You keep using that word. Let me tell you what family actually means." I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo from my recent promotion ceremony. "This is General Patricia Williams, who mentored me and helped shape my strategic thinking. This is Colonel Rodriguez, who taught me leadership principles that saved soldiers' lives. This is Sergeant Major Thompson, who's been with me through 3 deployments and never once failed to have my back." I scrolled through more photos. These are the people who celebrated my achievements, who supported me during difficult times, and who understood the importance of my military service. This is my real family, people who earned that title through their actions, not their biology. Victoria's face was getting red with anger. "So you're just going to abandon us? After everything we did for you growing up?" "Everything you did for me?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean like missing my high school graduation because you had a dance recital? Like dismissing my Bronze Star because you got a good grade on a college paper? Like telling me I was selfish for serving my country instead of attending your wedding?" I walked back to my chair and sat down, my decision crystallized. Here's what's gonna happen. I'm not giving you $500,000. I'm not giving you $500. I'm not helping Victoria get a government job she's not qualified for. I'm not rescuing you from the consequences you created through decades of poor decisions and misplaced priorities. Dad's face went through several emotions: shock, anger, and finally desperation. You can't be serious. We're your parents. You have the money, you have the connections. You could solve all of this with a phone call. You're absolutely right, I said. I do have the money, I do have the connections. I could solve your financial problems easily. But you know what the difference is between you and me? When someone I care about needs help, I actually provide it. I stood up and straightened my uniform. You taught me an important lesson 15 years ago. You showed me exactly how much family loyalty means to you when it conflicts with your personal priorities. You demonstrated that when someone you're supposed to love needs support, it's perfectly acceptable to choose your own interests instead. Mom was sobbing now, but I felt nothing. No guilt, no sympathy, no regret. We're sorry, David, we were wrong. We'll do anything to make it right. No, you won't, I said simply, because making it right would require acknowledging that you spent decades treating me like an inconvenience while worshiping Victoria. It would mean admitting that my military achievements were more significant than her social media following. It would require recognizing that the son you ignored became more successful than the daughter you obsessed over. I walked toward the door, then turned back one final time. You're gonna lose this house. Victoria's gonna have to find a real job and learn to support herself. You're gonna face the consequences of prioritizing appearances over substance and debt over responsibility. And you're gonna do it without any help from me. Victoria jumped up, her voice hysterical. You're destroying your own family. How can you be so cruel? I looked at her with complete indifference. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply applying the same family loyalty you showed me when I needed it most. You'll figure something out. You're resourceful. Isn't that what you told me when I was facing life or death deployment? As I walked out of that house for the last time, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I had been carrying for 37 years. The desperate calls and emails that followed over the next few weeks went unanswered. I changed my phone number and instructed my Pentagon staff that I was not available for personal calls from Ohio. 6 months later, I received news through distant relatives that they'd lost the house to foreclosure. Victoria had found work as a retail clerk at a department store, earning in a month what she used to spend on a single shopping trip. My parents had moved into a small apartment and were both working part-time jobs to make ends meet. I felt exactly as much sympathy for their situation as they'd shown for my military deployment 15 years earlier. Today, I'm Lieutenant General David Mitchell, commanding U.S. Army forces in the Pacific, responsible for 100,000 soldiers across 14 countries. I'm married to Colonel Sarah Chen, a brilliant military lawyer who understands duty, honor, and the meaning of genuine partnership. We have 2 children who will grow up understanding that love and support are demonstrated through actions, not words. My real family, the soldiers, officers, and military families who've been part of my journey, continues to grow stronger. We support each other through deployments, celebrate each other's achievements, and understand that true loyalty is proven when it costs you something. Sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is showing you exactly who they are, so you can build something better with people who actually deserve your love and respect. They chose Victoria's wedding over my deployment. I chose my military family over their financial crisis. The difference is, my choice was based on their demonstrated values, while theirs was based on favoritism and misplaced priorities. I have no regrets. But the story doesn't end there. The months following my final conversation with my family brought unexpected developments that proved just how right I'd been to cut ties with them permanently. 3 months after they lost the house, I received intelligence through military channels that made my blood run cold. During a routine security clearance review for my promotion to Lieutenant General, background investigators discovered that Victoria had been attempting to use my name and position to gain access to classified information. She'd been telling people at various government agencies that she was General Mitchell's sister and needed help with, quote, family business related to national security matters. She'd tried to get meetings with Pentagon staff, claiming she had important information to share about terrorist threats. Most disturbingly, she'd attempted to use forged documents with my signature to gain access to military installations. The investigation revealed that Victoria's desperation had driven her to increasingly dangerous and illegal behavior. When legitimate employment proved difficult and low-paying, she'd decided to monetize her connection to me in ways that could have compromised national security. The FBI's counterintelligence division had been monitoring her activities for weeks before bringing the matter to my attention. General Mitchell, the lead investigator, explained during our classified briefing, "Your sister has been attempting to impersonate a military dependent to gain access to restricted areas and classified information. We believe she's been trying to gather intelligence to sell to foreign contacts, though we have no evidence she's been successful." The irony was staggering. The woman who had dismissed my military career as unimportant was now trying to profit from my position in ways that could have landed her in federal prison for espionage. The sister who had called me selfish for choosing duty over her wedding was now willing to compromise national security for personal financial gain. I authorized the investigation to proceed with full cooperation from my office. Within 6 weeks, Victoria was arrested on charges of attempting to access classified information, fraud, and impersonating a military dependent. The case made national news, with headlines about a general's sister being charged with espionage-related crimes. My parents' response to Victoria's arrest revealed their character more clearly than anything that had happened before. Instead of acknowledging that their golden child had committed serious crimes, they blamed me for not preventing her desperate actions by helping them financially. Mom actually gave an interview to a local newspaper claiming that I had driven my sister to desperation by abandoning my family in their time of need. Dad went even further, appearing on a regional television program to discuss the military's culture of family abandonment. He portrayed himself as a patriotic father whose son had been corrupted by military values that prioritized duty over family loyalty. The interview was painful to watch, seeing this broken man trying to salvage his reputation by attacking the institution that had given his son purpose and meaning. But their public statements had an unintended consequence. Military families across the country who saw the interviews recognized the toxic family dynamics they described. Social media is filled with stories from military spouses and service members sharing their own experiences with family members who didn't understand or respect military service. The military community's response was overwhelming. Letters of support poured into my Pentagon office from soldiers, veterans, and military families who understood exactly what I'd experienced. Many shared similar stories of family members who treated military service as a burden rather than an honor, who demanded that deployment schedules accommodate civilian events, who never understood the weight of responsibility that comes with wearing the uniform. General Patricia Williams, now chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, called me into her office for a conversation that would define the final phase of my career. "David, this situation with your family has created an opportunity to address something the military has struggled with for decades, helping service members deal with unsupportive families." She offered me a position that would combine my operational experience with a new mission, developing programs to support military families, dealing with toxic relationships, and helping service members build healthy support networks within the military community. It was a chance to turn my personal experience into something that could help thousands of other soldiers facing similar challenges. The program I developed, called Service Family Support Initiative, became a model for military bases worldwide. We created counseling services for troops dealing with unsupportive relatives, mentorship programs connecting experienced service members with those facing family conflicts, and educational resources to help military personnel set healthy boundaries with toxic family members. The success of the program caught the attention of the Secretary of Defense, who recommended me for early promotion to Lieutenant General and assignment as Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel. At 39, I became one of the youngest 3-star generals in Army history, responsible for personnel policies affecting over 1 million soldiers and their families. My promotion ceremony was held at Arlington National Cemetery, attended by senior government officials, foreign military attachés, and hundreds of soldiers whose lives had been impacted by the programs I'd developed. The ceremony was broadcast live on military television networks, reaching service members stationed around the world. My speech that day focused on the military family, Not the biological family that may or may not support your service, but the chosen family of fellow service members who understand the sacrifices required to defend freedom. I spoke about finding strength in purpose rather than approval, about building relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation, and about the honor of serving something greater than personal comfort. The speech went viral within military communities, shared by thousands of service members who felt understood and validated in ways their biological families had never provided. Military blogs and publications featured excerpts, and I received invitations to speak at military academies, war colleges, and veteran organizations across the country. Meanwhile, Victoria's legal troubles continued to escalate. The initial charges led to investigations that uncovered additional crimes, including tax evasion related to her blog income and fraudulent insurance claims following her divorce. What had started as desperate attempts to access classified information had revealed a pattern of dishonesty and criminal behavior spanning several years. She was eventually sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, with additional time for violating the terms of her initial plea agreement. The woman who had been the center of my parents' universe was now a convicted felon, and their perfect family image was destroyed beyond any possibility of repair. My parents' response to Victoria's imprisonment was predictably dysfunctional. They mortgaged everything they had left to pay for expensive lawyers, borrowed money from distant relatives to cover legal fees, and spent their retirement savings on appeal processes that had no chance of success. Their loyalty to Victoria, even after her crimes had been proven in federal court, demonstrated the same twisted priorities that had defined their parenting throughout my childhood. The final chapter in our family's story came when Dad suffered a heart attack brought on by the stress of Victoria's legal troubles and their financial ruin. He survived, but the medical bills from his hospitalization and ongoing treatment pushed them into bankruptcy. Mom, now working 2 minimum-wage jobs to pay for basic necessities, sent me a letter asking if I would at least help with Dad's medical expenses. I read the letter once and threw it away without responding, not out of cruelty but out of clarity. These people had shown me who they were when I needed them most, and I had learned to believe them. Their current suffering was the direct result of choices they'd made consistently over decades. Choices to prioritize appearance over substance, favoritism over fairness, and enabling over accountability. Today, as I prepare for my 4th star and assignment as Commanding General of U.S. Army Pacific, I reflect on the journey that brought me here. Every obstacle my family placed in my path made me stronger. Every moment of support they denied forced me to find strength within myself and build genuine relationships with people who earned my respect. My wife Sarah and I now have 3 children, and we're raising them with values my parents never understood. Our kids learn that achievement requires effort, that respect must be earned, that family loyalty is demonstrated through actions rather than demanded through guilt, and that serving something greater than yourself gives life meaning that material success never can. Hell, family or can. They also learn that sometimes the people who share your DNA are not the people who deserve your love, and that building a chosen family of people who share your values is not just acceptable, it's essential for living an authentic, meaningful life. My biological family taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. They showed me exactly who not to become and exactly what kind of relationships to avoid. For that education delivered through decades of neglect, favoritism, and misplaced priorities, I am genuinely grateful. They chose a wedding over a deployment. I chose honor over obligation. They chose enabling over accountability. I chose excellence over approval. They chose immediate gratification over long-term stability. I chose service over selfishness. In the end, we all got exactly what our choices earned us. I have no regrets about any of it. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.